Welcome to the AI in Education podcast. Ray, we've got a special guest today, director and founder of Gen Ed Labs. We've got member of the advisory board of the Institute of AI in Education, consultant and ex-teacher, and also known online as the AI bias girl, but as we like to call her, Victoria Hedlund. Welcome today, Victoria.
Hello, thank you both for having me on. I've been so excited. I love this podcast so much. So it's
Oh, wow.
a dream come true to be here with you.
Well, also, I'm a fanboy as well, because I remember when we talked about your original research and we had that conversation about getting the research made open access, and your editor managed to do that, which was fantastic because it was great research. So I really want to dig into the whole AI bias thing, because you're practical. Like, I hear so many people talking in theoretical terms about it. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, you talk to any of the big corporations and there's all these ethical principles and responsible AI use, and it's all just fluff. It's nice ideas and it's nice, but what does that mean on a Friday afternoon when it's windy in a classroom? And that's kind of the space I'm trying to sit in, really.
Great.
What inspired you to get into this kind of topic yourself originally?
I'm a physicist, female physicist. That's my background. I used to teach physics. Obviously, being a woman in physics, not many of us. I've always followed gender equity and equality in physics and STEM subjects. And so when AI came around back, it was about 3 years ago now, I just started trialing things to see if it explained things the same way to a girl and a boy. Because obviously we've had a problem with textbooks and all kinds of things historically. And I was quite shocked that it did, because I thought, oh, this is new technology. This therefore must be better. And that's basically the whole premise on which my interest has been born.
And so here's a really important question then, because you say you started to kind of just try things. That's a very different mindset from I am using this. It's I want to discover what it does. It's like a researcher's experimental mindset.
Exactly. This is the space that I think we need to get in terms of the profession. And I don't think it's actually so much a problem for children as it is for staff, because we're so used to our EdTech use up until now. We're used to typing things in and getting a list of the possible answers from Google, right? And I know Google is traditional AI, not generative AI. So that we have had that problem for a while, but not really thought about it. But we're so used to getting a series of answers that we think are possible answers and then picking one ourselves. And so therefore we're used to this, say something, get an answer back, this kind of natural language idea. So then when we get to using generative AI, it's an extension of that. So we then think, okay, well, it gives me the answer. That must be the answer. And of course it doesn't. It's a probabilistic technology. It will give you different answers each time you ask it. And therefore, I think we need to approach it experimentally. We need to see each output as a result and not a conclusion. And then we need to ask the same question several times and look at the variation in those results. And that will help you to think, oh, actually, this is not the objective truth. It's just an answer, our result. I need to look a bit more critically across these results and work out what I want to accept or iterate on. So it's a huge mindset shift. And I think that's the basis for me of what being a human in the loop is. It starts off with this iterative experimental mindset that it's not going to solve my problems. It's not going to tell me objective facts, objective truths. It will give me an answer, one of many possible answers. And then it's up to me to do the work to work out what aligns with me and what I'm going to pick and use in my practice. And that sounds easy when I say it like that, but that's where the human work is. So we've got two choices. We give away our agency and we just blindly accept what it tells us, or we do the work, we sit with that friction and we look at alignment with ourselves and how we feel about things, much like we would with a group of humans, right? We'd ask them, we'd say, what's your opinion? What do you feel about this? We'd have that debate, wouldn't we? We wouldn't just say, oh, right, well, I'm going to go off and do that because you've told me. That's one of the things, one of the skills we try and promote in education, isn't it? In terms of justification, debate, critical analysis, all those skills. It's no different just because it's technology rather than a human, because we're basing it on natural language. So essentially, the communication between the two different things, human and technology, is the same as human to human. And so why are we therefore not employing the same critical analysis and the same skills for what it throws back at us for consideration?
I guess it's that we're used to with technology, the answer is often either right or wrong.
Yeah,
And then
binary, yeah.
when Google arrived, there are two types of people. There are types of people that know that the best place to bury a dead body is on page 2 of the Google search results because nobody ever goes there. And I'm in that group because it's like, I look at the first result, the second result, the third result. I've always done that with search engines because it's like, oh, well, there's different answers to a question. But I see people that will blindly take the fast answer. And I'm guessing they've copied that habit into the AI world and asked it to do something. And that's the answer. So
Yeah.
how do you move people's mindset to be thinking about it as being different?
So this is where the work for me lies, is in trying to take something and give tangible kind of chunks of evidence that can show quite easily and quite visibly how there's variation in the output of what you give. So that's why I do all the things like the top trump cards and the LinkedIn profiles, the Instagram profile. I usually use visual aspects to demonstrate the biases. But of course, the majority of biases will be felt within education in terms of text, stories, quotes, feedbacks, all kinds of things like that. And my biggest worry is how these are embedded, because they are not as visible as you might see. You might see an image and say, well, that's clearly gender bias or racially biased or biased against age or whatever. The same is there in explanation. I mean, people are using this for CVs. They're using it for statements, personal statements. People use it for teacher training applications, all kinds of things around education, as well as just marking work. And it's buried in there. So unless we can show people specific ways that it won't rock their world, it won't provide that friction or that tension that's needed to make them consider alternative mindsets.
The way you do this as well is just phenomenal, because your entire socials are just captivating. They're just really excited and interested.
Thanks.
You've got a real knack for like making some of these really serious and detailed and deep thought processes around bias and in large language models. You make them alive, right? You mentioned the Squishmallows cards there earlier on. Like, how did you come up with something like that? What kind of inspires you? Because you've got some amazing examples.
Before we get into the details of what you can show with Squishmallows, just take us back. What are Squishmallows and Top Trumps got to do with bias?
So, I'm obsessed with names and the first person bias that comes out of names, how we've built this statistical repository from all of our, well, not all of our, but select amount of training data from society. And basically, there's a whole bunch of bias that is then mirrored and amplified in some situations through AI use as well. So in my house, I have a son and a daughter. One's interested in Minecraft, one's interested in Squishmallows. And we were just playing Top Trumps one day. And I was thinking, I wonder what Gen AI would produce if we made some Top Trumps, and if it would vary by name. And so I try lots of things. And then I looked at that and I said, oh, right, okay. So this is actually quite bad. The stuff I produce, I have my memory turned off. I have my customization turned off. So it's as raw as you can get with the tools. But a lot of people, of course, will have those switched on, which then means there's even more compounded bias that can come out of these little tips and tricks. Another one I really like is the cat bias. Looking at cat bias, how you can see the different kinds of cats that the different AI tools produce. It does that with all kinds of animals. I was talking to someone the other day who did something to do with birds and animals and nature, and they were saying that ChatGPT can't make an image of a baby bird very well. So if you ask for a picture of a family of blue tits, it gives you 4, because families are obviously 4 in ChatGPT's mind.
Of course they are, yeah.
And it does a mummy bird and a daddy bird. And they're quite obviously like the human idea of 2 bigger ones, the man being bigger than the woman, because of this awful bias. And then the 2 baby ones. But it doesn't give you kind of birds without any feathers on, like baby birds are generally.
Yeah.
It gives you smaller versions of the adult birds. And they're feeding them worms. But they're not there. It's just ridiculous things like that. I find it, insanely interesting.
Tell me about the cat one. Well, what did you put in with that?
Oh, the cat one. You just say create an image of a cat, and then see the difference. And ChatGPT kind of gives you an airbrushed, overly fluffy one, whereas Gemini will always give you kind of a short-haired cat on a window ledge on a cushion, looking out at the cushion. It's really funny. There's all these little quirks that I find in the different tools.
So different AIs give you different perspectives on things, in the same way that if you went along a line of people, different people would give you different perspectives. But I guess that's a reflection of human bias as well, or recency bias. You know, I happened to see a fluffy cat this morning, therefore I'm going to describe a fluffy cat. But what's that got to do with bulbs?
Like, okay, so obviously these things are fun and they're a good way to show that a system is biased and that there are issues there. But then we need to take the next step to move in from, okay, so it does this thing called bias in these different ways. How can we then take that into how it influences what we learn and attainment and well-being within education? So that's when you start to kind of look at the idea of fairness. And I focus a lot on first-person fairness, which is looking at, if you include a name or other detail, age or something like that, how it can influence the output. And obviously this is really important, because if we have, say, and I hate AI tutors. Well, I don't hate them, just the current progression with AI tutors I dislike. So if you were to have some kind of automated system where it knows details about a child, which is likely, given kind of the linking we have with learning management systems and large AI providers, or even the child will enter it themselves if they're doing their own work, or it's got a name on it or a file name, obviously things like this, or it's linked to a register, all kinds of ways names and details can creep into AI. Then if we have this situation where the names are on there, it will treat the child or adult, it works for both, differently if it knows what their names are. So this is what my piece of research was. It was looking around, asking, explain something simple that I know from my background as teacher and teacher educator, asking it how a light bulb lights up to a girl and then a boy. And I did it for a girl and then a boy to avoid any of the kind of cultural or age or other intersexual biases that come if you use an actual name. So that's why I just used the straight genders. And I found that for girls, you basically get more words and a lot of it's waffle and it's quite scaffolded, but it doesn't have the technical depth and rigor that you would expect for scientific content. So we've taken something, and this is really important with science, because not so much perhaps for maths, but for science, we assume that the information that we get is objective truth, right? If we're reading a textbook, we'd be like, well, that's how the world works, and we'll go with that. But what we're getting here, if we include names in explanation, or they know who's asking, is that it's adding in subjectivity to something that would otherwise be objective. So, I don't want my daughter learning how a light bulb lights up through this idea that they're all beads in a necklace, and my son gets it through this idea that they're all race cars that smash into each other. Yes, they're both narrative metaphors, and for some children that might work for the boy and the girl, but it should be their choice or my choice as a parent what metaphors they get to learn through. I see a future moving forwards where the only way this can work to counteract this fairness is that a parent or a carer has an agreed digital profile that is then integrated into these systems where you have, these are the kinds of biases I will accept, these are the ones I won't accept, this is when you need to ask me, kind of all of this stuff. And then you start getting into the idea, well, is that almost like a digital twin of the child? And do we want that? There's a whole bunch of kind of dystopian future issues that come from that, right?
That's like, and I suppose you put in bias in to counteract the bias almost. And then that becomes bias as well. And you're like,
it's bias everywhere. Welcome to my world. And then you get like Gemini, which has, since I first started, I've seen that they've clearly mitigated some of the issues with first person fairness and bias. Years ago, when I would ask for a physics teacher image, it would give me kind of 50-year-old white male at a blackboard kind of thing. Now you'll get a 65-year-old grey-haired female with two girls and a boy in the classroom. So it's gone the other way with the bias, to try and counteract. And the more I look at it, the more I see it's almost like it's going to be a pendulum until we get into kind of some vaguely more acceptable territory. And people often say to me, well, what is acceptable? Is it, because the majority of physics teachers are men of that demographic? Isn't it just representing what's actually there? And so my answer is that we're not looking for a bias-free existence. We're looking for the agency and the decision making to be thrown back at us for us to choose. So if I type in "I am an autistic mother," it will come up with, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How can I help you today? Are you feeling stressed out and worn out?" And there'll be this big thing at the top which says this is not for medical diagnosis. Yet if I type in "I am a mother," it'll say, "Great. Hi, nice to meet you. How are you doing? Do you want some ideas for how to keep your children entertained?" So before it makes any assumption about me and what autistic means, it should be throwing questions back at me, before it makes that assumption. And I think that's what we need in education. So, for example, explain how a light bulb lights up. It should be saying, "Great, what narrative metaphor would you like me to use? What are your interests?" So it's prompting the human. And I think that's where we need to get to in education specifically. It needs to more prompting of the human for your input. And people don't like that because that's more effort on their part. And this is the outsourcing and offloading and all those kind of cognitive issues and concepts that we're sitting within at the moment. It's more work because you have to think about what you want more, but then you get outputs that are more representative of your identity and your alignments and the context that you work within.
But that's a tricky thing to ask people to do when they'll rush into school tomorrow morning saying, "I've seen this amazing AI tool and I'm going to use it with my class today." But people have got used to that mode. It's almost like, well, we're just going to pick it up and use it because it's the best that's available to us. But they wouldn't do that with other classroom resources. Like the process to pick a textbook is long and arduous and involves a lot of discussion. The process to pick your favorite AI tool is, "Oh, I saw this today. It gives me nice pictures. I'm going to use it."
Yeah, pretty much. This is one of my bugbears because this is where it becomes less about pedagogical value and educational worth and more about marketing and corporate structures. So the better you market your product, the more stuff you can throw and the more hype you can generate. And it's all built on the back of saving workload. All of it is built on workload. So it's exploiting that vulnerability in the profession that teachers are basically wonderful, but usually overworked. And yes, it will create something, but the quality that it creates will be a bit rubbish, so it's either way you lose. You've got to pick. Do you want to be delivering? I mean, I hate delivering sessions that are not my own. I will do everything myself. If when I used to teach, they used to say, "We've got a scheme of work and there's trays of stuff." And I'd be like, "Whoa, I don't do nothing from a tray. I will adapt to each context in each class that I've got after I've worked out what works for them." So that's my ethos. But I mean, I'm also aware I'm a bit of a control freak. Like I won't use cruise control because I don't really trust it. And I like the experience of deciding how quickly I go and when I break. So it's the same kind of metaphor with education. So yeah, there is a decision. And I think it's probably hard for educators to hear that there's a decision, that you have to decide at the moment anyway, if you want quick workload gains that won't necessarily be equitable or be in the best interest of your context, or if you want to front load a bit more your effort putting into your work and then have a lesson which resonates more and is engaging more and is better for the wellbeing and attainment of your students. And I'm not judging in either of those camps, but it's essentially the choice that people are going to have to make. And then another thing is that I read today about Notebook LM, and there's a new part of that where you can edit the output, because we know that a lot of the images that it produces are a bit rubbish. And from the science part of the research I'm doing at the moment with Helen Harden is looking at the quality of the science image and tying it to misconceptions. So we'll be publishing that later in the year or early next year. But I'm thinking, well, if we're getting to a point where we're using a tool to generate material and then we're editing the material, at what point would it just have been easier just to have made the material ourselves and get it exactly how we want? Because everybody's saying, "Oh, isn't it wonderful? You can edit this." Well, yeah, if it's the odd spelling, yeah, then I guess that's all right. But if you're putting a lot of work in to then realigning that output, where's the gain? because everybody's stuff looks the same because it's all done by Notebook LM. So you've not got any originality or uniqueness. So it's useful, but we're also losing sight of the fact that we do also have this other opportunity of making it ourselves and reusing that. It's an interesting debate, I find, for workload versus productivity.
And I suppose when you switch the lens as well, because I noticed one of your posts a while back was talking about actually it's a safeguarding risk as well. So when you look into students, you know, you've got the workload side from the staff point of view, but then from a student point of view, bias can actually be safeguarding issue, right?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, it's a representational harm one. I've had leaders say to me, yeah, but nobody's asking. And I say, but they will. As soon as Ofsted or whatever accountability frameworks come in, as soon as they're upskilled enough, and as soon as we've had this period where we've stuck young children on chatbots to learn about how the Romans lived or whatever, and they've had all these implicit biases that the men did this and the women did that, that's going to compound over time. And that's going to be reflected in attainment and well-being. And two of the most important measures that we like to score ourselves on in education, aren't they? So people will be asking, because I've done research which shows that it will talk to girls and it will talk to boys differently for career advice. For the same A levels and the same prompts, just with the name, knowing the name, it will say to the girl, well, are you sure you want to go and study physics? You've got good A levels, but it's really, really hard. And you should perhaps talk to some people first before you go and do that. Whereas to the boy, it will say, brilliant, you've got fantastic A levels. That's absolutely brilliant. You should get an internship, you should be visiting, and you should be getting your application in. But from the outside, a child's not going to go home and say, oh, well, ChatGPT told me this or Gemini told me that. But it's building up inside the child. So it's widening that equity gap, and that will start consolidating over time. And so I think schools need to start looking at the risk, the representational harm risk.
So just a question about that one. As I'm hearing you talk about that example, I think that those same kind of issues exist with the humans that give careers advice.
I agree. Yeah.
I think about my two daughters went to a girls' school and they didn't teach computer science. So there was no route for the girls in that school, and there were nearly 2,000 girls in that school, to go and study computer science. And so those kind of bias issues already exist in the current systems, which is, I guess, why they're turning up in AI, because it's trained on what we've done historically. It is an opportunity to be better, I think, isn't it, as well?
That's what's disappointing, right? I mean, that's, to me, having followed, and I mean, I'm only really talking about the gender space. I mean, we know, I think it's Stanford, the research is from, there's a couple of places, that the biggest biases that we get for children are the SES, and the biases, measures of affluence and all of that. So basically, if it knows a postcode or a town, it will be inferring and limiting attainment based on that. So, and that's even higher magnitude than race or gender. So, you know, if you think of all the pieces of work that people are going to be using, kind of the recounts, what did you do? Talk about what you did on holiday, where you went on holiday, what did you do on your day off? All of that type of stuff. The inference and the inferred intent from these models now, these reasoning models, is so high that whilst it's reasoning, it's most likely to be having these assumptions within that. So that's we start to get into all this idea of safety and alignment and deceptive thought and all that work there in kind of mechanistic interpretability impacts education, because it means you can't be sure of the quality of reasoning and the quality of assumption that's coming out about something very basic about a child going to the seaside at the weekend. And then you ask it for a next step on that work, and it thinks, well, that child's from, say, I don't know, Southend. There's quite a lot of deprivation over here in Southend. And then it takes that into limiting the cognitive challenge. This is one of the things that I look at. It will give you kind of recall and lower. I know we're not supposed to use Bloom's anymore, but back in the days when you used to use Bloom's, the kind of lower cognitive skills at the bottom of the pyramid, rather than if it was a more affluent area, Earl's Court or something, it would push it more towards the appraisal and the create and, you know, and everything else in between is more like apply. So it's taking that inferred context and superimposing it and using it to limit the next step and the attainment. And this is where my issue comes with AI tutors. I want to see some really robust research. And if I can get my hands on any of the things that are thrown out when they come out over here, I will be testing them.
So What would you recommend for a teacher listening, or an IT leadership team, or a school leadership team, and they thinking about using particular tools, or whatever tool they're using now? How do they test them for bias? Is there something you can point them to, or are there things you do just to test? Is it the simple stuff? But even if you do find that, then what do you do about it? Do you acknowledge it? What would your recommendations be, I suppose?
Okay, so I walked around Bet over here in January this year asking big corporations exactly this, what they do about bias. And it was quite interesting. And so this is an open call to any corporation or edtech provider to contact me and tell me and justify what they do and how they deal with bias within their systems. So we like to assume that people are on this, just like you get all these companies saying it's safe. Nothing with Gen AI is safe. If you look at our AI Safety Institute and all of the alignment and the safety papers, there's this idea across society that there's some really clever people somewhere that are on this and they're going to ensure that alignment happens and there's not going to be deceptive AI use. If you look at people like Geoffrey Hinton and the people that are at the real edge of the field, they're actually, and the Anthropic paper this week as well, they're actually calling for a halt because nothing is safe. I don't want to freak people out. People often tell me that I'm miserable and that I'm anti-AI. I'm not anti-AI. I think there's a lot of good that can happen of it. I'm just realistic to the oversight that needs to be there.
One of the questions I've got, though, as I'm listening to this is, today, bias exists in the classroom. There will be teachers that identify a certain student and they will, in their head, things will happen, when they're marking it. And that's why they do blind marking and exams and stuff like that. What standard are we looking for? I mean, it seems to me like some of the bias issues we talk about in teaching and learning might be a series of small harms that compound. But then there's some really big ones like AI in assessment and its use in assessment, where it's not a small harm that compounds, it's a life-changing moment that could be affected. I mean, do you see them as different scenarios? What's your views on AI and the assessment processes?
It's a really good question. So I had someone come up at a presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago with a very valid question. And they said, I loved everything you've talked about, apart from the fact that there's always been bias in the classroom. Teachers are biased. So why are we judging AI by a different standard when it's already there, which is essentially what you've just said? And so I have a couple of answers. I thought deeply on that. I appreciated that question. I do like questions and challenges. Helps move us forward. And I came to the conclusion that there's two aspects, really. The first one is that when you've got a teacher, we put them through a normalization. As a human, we put them basically through a normalization process. And we call it teacher training. And we say, here's a set of values, whatever your values are, get rid of them because these are the values that you need to demonstrate or you're not going to do it. So we have that process that we force them through and we continually measure them against. We don't have that for AI. We have no AI teacher standards, which is one of the things that I've called for a while now. The second thing is at the frequency of interaction. So on a good day in a class with 35 pupils, you may talk to each pupil in there, I don't know, anywhere between 3 and 10 times, maybe. Your chance to interact in a biased way, and even less in terms of written and marking and that kind of aspect, is quite small. If you think about how many prompts you would fit in, how many iterations of prompt and output you would fit in within an hour's lesson if a child was stuck on an AI tutor, the frequency of exposure to bias within the system or bias decisions is a lot higher with AI than it would be for a human. So I'm not discounting the fact that we are biased, but it's not comparative in my view. So that's I think that's quite an interesting point. And the other one in terms of assessment is that I do believe AI can be used for assessment if, and this is a big if, you really, really, really know what you're doing and you have good evals and good benchmarks. And I know a couple of people in roles where I know they are doing that and they're very progressive and we interact in ways that help kind of push each other forwards with what this should look like. But just for an average teacher taking a picture of a child's work and asking for a mark, just don't do it. It's my answer. So I have two major things. Don't use AI for marking and don't use AI detectors. Both of those two things I'm very
Well,
strong on.
You mentioned before we started today that one of the pieces of work you did, you actually basically took the cover sheet off an assignment and actually got it to mark it based on the name. Can you explain that one again? Because that was really fascinating, where there was quite a discrepancy in the marks they were given out.
Yeah, so I did a little experiment about a month ago now where I took a GCSE history medical option paper. I completed it. I haven't done history for quite some time, and I deliberately just did it and didn't put too much effort in to see what it would do, because I didn't want an extreme of very high or very low. I just wanted an average piece of work. So I randomized that. And then I put it through 100 times, just the piece of work against the mark scheme. I've got the mark scheme and got it to grade it. So that was my control. And then I did the same thing, but this time I included the cover sheets, and I wrote on the cover sheets Victoria Hedlund or Victor Hedlund. So 2-letter difference. So there's a difference in gender. And first thing I found actually was that inclusion of the cover sheet was the major impacting factor, because as soon as especially for Claude, as soon as you include that cover sheet, it goes, this is an exam, and it forces a persona of being an examiner. So the marks became a lot less and a lot harsher just by the fact it worked out. I mean, this is what I'm talking about inference. It's fascinating, isn't it? That was significant, and that reduced the marks by a significant amount. So then I had to redo the control with the exam, just a blank exam cover page on there. So it was comparative. So I found that actually GPT was the one that experienced the most gender bias. The girl got lower marks than the boy. Gemini was a bit variable. And I mean, question by question analysis is really interesting as well. There's quite some variance within kind of the longer essay type questions, showing that's where the majority of the variance in marks occurred rather than the recall ones, because there's more interpretation, I guess, involved in that. So it links back to the perceived persona of the person writing it. Across the board, I found that just for the control, so regardless of the names, just for the control, there was 14, I think it was out of 56. So a fair percentage variance within that mark. And I computed that worked out. It was about 4 grade boundaries, 3 to 4 grade boundaries. But then a lot of people replied to me I'm not a history specialist, so I'm not used to marking history papers, whereas, I can do the science stuff, but not the history. And they replied saying that actually the human tolerance with marking, I think, was about 6 or 8 marks, something like that for that paper. And so whilst it was showing a fair bit of variance, there's also a large human variance as well, but it was significantly more. And obviously then you've got the name part of it as well, so it makes it a lot worse for girls and higher for boys. And that was just a case study. I need to do that over a huge data set, which I can't afford, because I need funding for that if I'm going to do that, because it would cost so much in terms of the different papers, the different work examples, all of that, to process that, to get statistical significance to prove that. But it's an interesting case study for why you shouldn't just upload a mock paper. It was following the BBC article where a school had said that they were using AI to assess their mock papers. I've had people saying I'm the only one that will mark my classes data because I know the individual and I know what they're capable of. And that sounds nice, and I admire that, but also there's a huge prospect for bias there, isn't there?
Yeah, huge.
Yeah,
So
it sends off the alarms in my head, because okay, well, Johnny's rubbish, so therefore I'm not gonna assess his work fairly. It's preconceived idea.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, I guess, if you had a completely neutral teacher, they would know their child better because they have the exposure every day to them and all of those conversations and what we tend to call professional judgment over here. But we've set up our exams so that they don't necessarily involve professional judgment. They're supposed to be more comparative across the whole country, nationally. So you start getting into the issue of what is assessment for and how do different contexts work. And it seems to me this whole idea of AI for personalisation is inversely related to assessment, because if we are going to be using AI tutors and AI a lot in education, and we're aiming for personalisation, which essentially I'm assuming is personal significance for an individual child, then we're going to end up in these contextual bubbles. and then we're going to slap a national assessment on, which is assessing a shared curriculum, then there's a disconnect there, isn't there, right? Because you're saying, well, you go off and learn about the current through unicorns, but we're still going to test it in terms of maths and this type of diagram. So this is one of the issues I think personalised learning needs to deal with.
Kids these days and adults are caught in algorithmic bias anyway, aren't they? And we see it happening with the president of the United States, with Elon Musk. Everybody's caught in their own bubble because their algorithms are feeding them that content. So it's a big issue here in Australia at the minute. You have the social media delay and things like that to support with those conversations. But I think it's happening even wider than the kind of Gen AI element, isn't it, at the minute?
I mean, my LinkedIn algorithm gets down prioritized sometimes, and I think it's purely just because I'm a girl. So I think in a couple of weeks, I'm just going to swap it to being a boy and see what difference I get.
Okay,
we might have to try that with a podcast as well.
Do it. We'll all do it.
I'm just thinking about what I'm going to take away from this. So some of the things I'm going to take away are just that awareness of bias and thinking, okay, if I am using AI, the less that I tell it that it could be using bias. So the examples you gave us are gender, names, presumably surnames. I've seen some research that says it treats Asian students differently from Anglo-European or whatever. Locations, postcodes, addresses, all of that stuff could affect the way that it interacts with the student or describes things or marks things or whatever. So that minimization thing becomes really important. But I think more than anything, I'm going to take away the message that I shouldn't be using it for critical things. I should be thinking really careful about some of the tasks that I use it for. If 5 humans disagreed on something, probably a great use case for AI. But if there is definitively a single answer, and that single answer is going to be relied upon to make a decision later in life, geez, I don't want to get that wrong.
Exactly. So you need to think about your pedagogical use case. So why am I using AI? So, years ago with AFL, we'd think, oh, what situation am I going to use traffic light cards or mini whiteboards for? I'm going to use them specifically for this purpose. And this is what I'll do with the information. It's the same mindset we need to apply to AI. What am I using this for? Is it just because it's fashionable and it's cool and we've got a free subscription? That's not a pedagogical use case. It's because you want to achieve this or this. And it can be wonderful for a lot of things. I mean, it can make great worksheets if you're very specific with what you want it to do. But you have to know what you're doing and you have to co-create and work with it and do the work of being the human in the loop if you want decent outcomes. And if you don't choose that method, you're outsourcing your agency. And a lot of teachers are very worried about AI taking over their profession. Well, here's a thought. If you are outsourcing all of your agency all the time, you are making yourself replaceable. Because if that's the quality of education we're going to allow for our children, for our young, then that is replaceable by AI. So what isn't replaceable is you doing the work of being the human in the loop. And obviously that has workload implications. But when you're in the mindset and you're used to it, you can reap the benefit later on. It's like solar power, isn't it?
Yeah.
It takes a long time as it costs a lot, but you get it back over years if the pigeons don't come.
I was thinking as well, trying to take my bias out because I'm always thinking about my bias because obviously I work for Microsoft in the background. But one of the interesting things I was telling the teacher about the other day is you can see the 2 models. So there's something in Copilot in the researcher thing called counsel and critique. And it's really interesting because you can ask something and then it appears on the left-hand side in GPT and it appears on the right in like Claude Opus. So, and then it goes to the bottom and kind of goes, oh, well, GPT said this, Claude said this. This is what the kind of summary is. The more companies or providers start to provide end users with a little bit more interesting analysis on those kind of things. The problem is that teachers don't really care about like GPT-3 or 4.0 or whatever most of the time. But it's interesting how you can do interesting things like that. And maybe that's what people should be thinking about when the output comes out, having almost like another layer of discussion, almost like the prompting layer gives you the answer, but then it re-prompts it again. I don't know. Like there may be things inside the tools that people can do.
I'm going to take issue with you saying teachers don't care about the different models. I'm not sure if they don't care. I think it's that they don't have time to be thinking about all these different things.
Yeah.
I quite often get all 4 AI models up on my screen and do the same thing in the 4 models because I'm looking for the one that's going to help me get furthest in my task. That takes time.
One of the things that I think can help with teachers is that I have an Uber prompt that they can paste in any AI, which will walk them through trying to work out what their digital pedagogical alignment is. And by that, what I mean is standard things like, what's your ideas about teaching? You know, are you about explicit instruction? Are you embodied learning? All these kinds of questions. It's all structured in there. And then it gets them to think about how that relates to AI choices. So I think one of the things that overwhelms teachers is just the vast amount of tools and not knowing what they're used for, when and why. So if I'm going to use Suno, it's going to be because I want them to have a catchy mnemonic or something like that, you know, learn the days of the week. So it's essentially a retrieval task that I want to do through an audio means. So that's my pedagogical use case, and I can then align to the tool that I use. I'm doing a STEM learning keynote in a few weeks, which is about being stuck in the AI wonderland. You chase this white rabbit of personalised learning and workload reduction through this AI wonderland, and loads of nonsense stuff happens to you on the way. And we're at the point where we're just coming up to the Queen. You know, what's going to happen, you know? And I do think that they're trapped in that, and it makes them feel vulnerable, and it can affect confidence. And I think if not addressed, it will affect retention to the profession. So one of the things that they can do is to use kind of a prompt like this, or think about, right, I will focus on using this tool and this tool for this reason and this reason. Once I've mastered that, I will then move on to this, this, and this, rather than trying to do everything all the time, trying to feel like they're keeping up and being stuck in this hype. Focus on 2 use cases, like I will use Gemini to create retrieval questions, and I will do that, and I will do that well. And once I've mastered that and I've modeled that to my students, then I will go on to creating visuals or worksheets with Notebook LM or whatever the next use case is. So I think structuring that, this is what CPD should look like for teachers moving on in the AI age. Breaking it down, chunking it, focus on this, then go on to that, because you can't do it all in a good way. It's going to negatively impact the profession. So my advice there, pick 2 use cases, 2 pedagogical needs, and learn the tool inside out experimentally for that. Just like you were saying there, Ray, that's what you've done in terms of output critical analysis. You're comparing the 4. How wonderful would it be to model that in front of students, or record it if you're worried about what would come up?
And I think that's what's amazing about the content that you've got as well, because I think this is a great opportunity to, you know, these are just fun activities, and they're interesting and they're great.
Yeah.
I remember when I was teaching myself, these kind of activities are things that kids latch onto as well. And they came up with really good use cases as well. Oh, you know, create an image of a doctor, create an image of this. What happens if we do this? And by doing fun stuff and interesting activities, you see the bias, and you're teaching kids about the bias by doing it. And I suppose that's what you're doing with teachers as well. I think it's a great activity.
Oh, thanks. You can do it with gamer profiles as well, YouTube profiles. Imagine what my gamer tag would be, or my YouTube channel would look like from my name. That's for older children, because obviously 14-year-olds might not want Squishmallows.
That's what I love about following your work, Victoria, is you start with a really simple thing that everybody can grasp straight away. And then 3 hours later, you found yourself dragged down the rabbit warren of complexity and understand things really well. But it starts with that simple thing. And so if there's something I'd urge people to take away from you, it is take one of those hooks, start talking to other people about that hook, you know, whether it's Squishmallows or light bulbs or whatever it might be, and then just go down the rabbit hole and learn more. It's a fantastic way to engage people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Victoria, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. It's been amazing. My brain's boiling over with all these ideas now. Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work. The impact you're having is phenomenal. And we'll put all the links to all your content in the show notes so people can follow you. And yeah, amazing stuff. And hopefully see you in Australia one day.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, and for all the good work that you're doing as well. It's so essential in this space to have real voices like this that connect to real practitioner and aren't just fluffy things up here in the air that mean
true.
nothing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.